So many of our youth today are a bunch of chicken-livered, yellow-bellied, no-backbone, spineless, weak followers of godless, and not even able to lead a flea to a dog's tail. It's high time we produce a generation of young people that will be able to do, be, and say like King David when facing Goliath and his entire Philistine army, "You come against me with a sword and a spear and a shield. I come against you in the name of the Lord of hosts, the God of the armies of Israel, whom you have defiled. This day the Lord will deliver you into my hands, and I'll smite you and cut your head off, and give your body to the fowls of the air and the wild beasts of the earth. Then the whole earth will know that there's a God in Israel." 1 Samuel 17, 45 and 6. The Civil War also had a tremendous amount of young leaders who had backbone and ability to fight for a cause. Listen to this story of one such northern leader. Lieutenant Bayard Wilkinson. He was but a lad of 17 years of age, and he'd received his commission as a lieutenant 2 years after spending active field service at Fredericksburg and Chancellorsville. He learned to look with calmness on the wounds of his comrades and upon death. He had long been the ranking officer in his battery and had brought the soldiers under his command to such a high degree of proficiency and discipline that the men forgot his youth in the admiration of his soldierly ability. It so happened that the first day of the great Battle of Gettysburg, July 1st, 1863, that was to prove to be the turning point in the war for the Union, that the task of holding one of the most crucial and decisive positions was left to this now 19-year-old lieutenant soldier. He was given 4 cannons, light 12-pound field pieces, and with these he plunged gallantly into conflict, and for the first time held in check the Southern troops under John B. Gordon. But the Confederate commander, soon discovering that his infantry was making no headway against Wilkinson's strong fire, brought up 2 cannon batteries and, posting them on a commanding hill, ordered his cannoneers to silence or drive away the spiteful little Union battery with only 4 cannons, working such havoc in his ranks. 12 cannons were turned on Wilkinson's 4, as the Confederate battery was posted also on a hill that towered above the little knoll where the 4 cannons lay. They had the advantage, not only in cannons, but in position. But the solid shot and shell falling thick and fast among Wilkinson's gun and artillerymen never made them move. They didn't falter, for Wilkinson was there encouraging them. He was sitting upon his well-trained horse. He rode in and among the cannons, speaking a word here of encouragement and giving an order there, never once losing his complete self-possession, and everywhere cheering his men on by displaying a calm courage. Finally, seeing that the situation was becoming desperate, he spurred his horse to the front and sat there immovable, like a statue in a park, seeking by this means to inspire his men with confidence. And it worked. His men followed his brave, daring example, and they began to work their guns with such rapidity and precision that the utmost efforts of the Confederate infantry failed to move upon the northern position. Through field glasses, the officers of the South could clearly see that Wilkinson had thus held the cannon men to their work. Southern General Gordon himself pressed forward to discover what it was that delayed the advance of his lines. He needed but glance once to see the problem. It was that young officer on that horse. He told his men, "Men, turn your guns on that feller on horseback. If he's out of the way, we can silence their cannons." With 12 guns turned upon Wilkinson, it is at any wonder that he could go unhurt. A rifle shot him in the leg, cutting and tearing open the flesh and shattering his bone. His horse fell to the ground, and his comrades under fire picked him up and brought him towards the rear. But he ordered them to lay him towards the front so that he could watch the progress of the conflict. There was no surgeon on the field, and with his own hands he fixed his wounded up leg. He took a handkerchief out and turned a tourniquet upon his leg. Then he took his jackknife out and cut away the wounded flesh and shattered bones. Fever came upon him, and parching thirst took possession of him. An artilleryman went back to the well to a house not far from the rear. He came back with a canteen of cool water. Wilkie's eyes brightened with love as he saw the messenger return with the water. But just as he put the canteen to his mouth and was raising it, a man next to him, wounded, said, "For God's sakes, Lieutenant, give me some of that first." Unmindful of his own suffering, the young officer handed the canteen to his wounded neighbor, who drank greedily every drop it contained. Wilkinson smiled on the man, turned slightly, and was dead in a few minutes. From that story, we learn of the courage and loving kindness of a 19-year-old boy. What about you, men and boys listening to me now? I'd like to challenge you to be a great leader for Jesus. As I travel around to hundreds of churches across this great nation of ours, I've noticed that there are so few men in leadership of the Church of Jesus Christ today. Why is it that most churches have more women who regularly attend the worship service? Check out who's doing most of the Sunday school teaching. Again, it's women. It seems that whenever teachers or pastors ask for questions to be answered or comments to be made, once again, it's the women who speak up first. If you don't believe me, start checking it out for yourself. Why is it that when it comes to teaching children, the men think it's the women's job? This should not be, especially today because of such a high rate of divorce here in America. Children are often left without the proper male role models to follow. When I study the Bible, it seems that the fathers played the important role of training their children. Boys were taught to stand up and fight for their nation and against sin of other nations. Remember, Jesus chose 12 men. The women naturally followed. Jesus created Adam first and taught him the responsibility of leadership and dominion before Eve even came on the scene. He needed to have a man that understood what it was to be a provider and a protector and to be a leader. God wanted him well-trained. Believe me, young men listening, young godly Christian women are looking for strong Christ-centered men who will stand up to be counted for Jesus and fight for liberty and the defense of their family, church, and nation. My call for you in this devotion is to begin to take that leadership in your home, in your church, job, school, and nation. Take it into your hands. Begin to train yourself to be God's man in demand. Be the David of the 1980s. America needs you, not a weak-minded, visionless male. Is it any wonder that there are so many homosexuals around today? We need to train men. Fathers listening to me, train your boys to be leaders. Teach in children's church or Sunday school. Rise to leadership. It's time to cut the head off of sin in our nation today. And you can either be the one who does it or be like one of Saul's 250,000 soldiers who just stood around and watched and listened to Goliath defy God and their nation. I'd like you to be like 18-year-old David, who dared to fight sin, standing in the way of God's victory.